Do you ever feel like you're just not on time? Man, we're running around here and busy these days. Oh, I screwed that up, sorry. I mean in time, because we're talking about vehicles here at DG's Pro Tech. So today, we're gonna talk about some more timing chain stuff. We did a video on the EcoBoost F-150, which is a 3.5. We did a video on the 5.4 timing chains, and now we're gonna get into the most notorious, most difficult to time vehicle in the domestic market, in my professional opinion, the 4-liter overhead cam, single overhead cam SOHC engine by Ford. Make sure you hit our open house coming up June 1st. We're gonna have a dyno for the guys and a bit of a truck show. Loaded dyno on site by Advanced Revolution so we can play with some of the vehicles we've been building. We're gonna have a complete open house so you guys can see our newly finished shop from a few months ago. Everything's gonna be all cleaned up and shine out. There's gonna be a barbecue, there's gonna be a bouncy castle. We're gonna have some of our vendors, including Motor Ops, Off the Lens Media, our sponsors of this. CKNX Radio is gonna be here doing their on-site DJ all day. We're gonna have lots of fun June 1st. Make sure you come and see us. We're hoping for nice weather. All right, so a little bit of history, because we always seem to do a bit of that in this shop. Back in the late 80s, Ford had a 2.8, actually I believe it was a 2.9 liter V6. And this was a normal V6, naturally aspirated pushrod motor. It was a great little motor for the late 80s. Fast forward a couple more years, and in the early 90s, they brought out the 4-liter overhead valve or pushrod V6 engine. And it was just a punched out basic version of the 2.9 liter. Another great engine. But then you start to get into mid-90s, late 90s technology, and that kind of horsepower, I think it was 160 horsepower, was just not going to cut it in that application that it fit. Fast forward to the late 90s, what did Ford do? They said, hey, let's take an engine that works really, really well, the 4-liter V6, let's give it a modern twist rather than re-engineer the wheel. And what we ended up with was the 4-liter SOHC, which stands for Single Overhead Cam V6. Neat things about it, the basic block design is identical to its pushrod V6 version of a 4-liter. It is still a 4-liter V6, very similar block. The difference is they decided to add overhead cam time, or overhead cam style design rather than overhead valve, which is pushrod. Advantages to overhead camshaft: less moving parts, which means with less moving parts we keep the efficiency down. So with pushrod engines, if you can picture a camshaft, which normally sits in block like this, and it runs pushrods. Pushrods going up and down in time will rock rockers, which open valves. It's a lot of moving parts. You got a camshaft with lobes, lifters, whether they be automatic adjusting or not, pushrods, then a rocker, potentially a follower after it to take up lash. You got a lot of moving valve train parts, and that's a lot of room for slop. Increase power and efficiency. To do that, we want to increase RPM. Lots of things moving fast. You're gonna maybe have some issues. Keep it simple, stupid. Go to an overhead cam design where simply a cam lobe just pushes on an actual, what they call a finger follower, or very similar to a rocker, pushes down on valve. Way simpler, right? We just simply drive it with a chain, just like this, to turn our camshaft. Now, if that was bolted, that would turn, but to turn our camshaft, real simple design. Except because Ford decided to do this on an engine that had originally been a pushrod V6, it took a lot of extra engineering. And what you see in front of us is one that we're repairing in the shop because they can be difficult to repair and definitely time. So in this engine, the complicated part is we have to have up to 4 chains. So if I bring you around to the front here, normally you simply have your crankshaft, which turns and drives your camshaft. Real simple, right? Camshaft runs our push rods that run our rockers. Real simple to time. Typically a timing tensioner like you see here keeps that chain nice and tight and no issues. This is what you find in most of your small block V8s, big block V8s since the beginning of time. In the case of V6, very similar design and life is good. In modern overhead cam designs, typically we take a chain, like you've seen in our other videos, from the crankshaft sprocket up and over your overhead camshaft sprocket like you see here. But when you're going to re-engineer something totally different, you've got to come up with something totally different. So what Ford ended up doing was leaving the base chain in from crank to what would be cam. Now, it's no longer a cam, it's what we call a jackshaft, because it simply is a straight through, it's like a cam with no lobes that goes straight through to give the vehicle something to drive against. Now in behind here, and I'm going to pull this apart in a second, we drive our what would be like a cam gear, but instead it's just a splined jackshaft gear that then runs up and drives our left side camshaft. And what about the right side? We got a cam up there too. What Ford did was in the back, The jack shaft, which you see the back end of here, drives another another chain that then drives up and drives our right side camshaft. You notice that all the gears slightly look different, and we have to have tensioners to keep tension on these things, like you see here, and we have to have a plastic guide to run all these in. And I said there was 4 chains. That's only 3. The 4th one is back here at the front, because after they engineered this thing, they found if it is a full drive model, they typically have a bit of an imbalance or a bit of a shake. Well, how do we fix that? Well, you could start all over again, re-engineer the engine, or in Ford's case, and this is all in my opinion, guys, to the best of my knowledge, we simply add what's called a balance shaft. So this shaft really does nothing other than almost like balancing a tire. It allows the vehicle to take up its shake through this shaft within here, and then of course we have to have a chain to drive it, which is also driven off the back side of the crankshaft. Now this wouldn't be so complicated if everything was keyed like a normal crankshaft or camshaft is. However, notice I can move that, and if I loosen this one off a bit and move that, and I'm not turning stuff, it's because nothing's keyed. Not one thing is keyed in this other than the crankshaft, which means everything is friction fit. We're talking torque to yield bolts. We're talking things have to be held perfectly with special service tools before we take them in, and that gets complicated. So what did this vehicle come in for? Well, this engine's in a 2003 Explorer Sport Track, which is really a crew cab Ranger. That engine is also located in most vehicles, the Ford Ranger pickup. It was located in some of the mid-2000s Mustangs. It was also in, of course, the Explorer, Explorer Sport Track, Explorer Sport, in multiple years, starting at about 96 and going right till the end of production, which I believe was 2011 or 12. So it's in a lot of things. Typically the problems we see where this vehicle comes in, it comes in with an engine rattle, and it's aggressive. Like I'm talking, engine sounds like it's coming apart. You catch it early enough, we can save it. You don't catch it early enough, thing jumps time, and we're into bent valves and pistons, and that's bad. Let's take you over here for a second, show you some broken parts that came out of this engine. So in true DG's design, we're back on the bench here showing you the broken parts. So, like I said, we have our standard crank to what would be cam gear. Obviously 2-to-1 size like a normal setup with cam crank gear. We have a tensioner, and these are not hydraulic like you've seen in other vehicles. They're just bent springs pushing on a plastic guide. Basic technology. This was an older vehicle. You'll have another plastic guide that in this case was disintegrated that would go on the other side, and that's what drives that. This would then slide in, notice not splined, simply held with a very, very long torque to yield bolt to keep everything together and tight. This is going to drive our front, driver's side camshaft lower and upper gear. And then at the back of the jack shaft, you can picture this way, way, way at the back, it's driving our other right side or passenger side camshaft from the top. Now, like I said, nothing is keyed. You don't see any keyways here. So we're talking about a lot of torque to yield bolts. We've got one at the jack shaft, one at the top of one cam, one at the top of the other cam. Of course, our large long one that goes at the front, and then of course one at the crankshaft as well. Now don't forget this little chain right here. This is our balance shaft chain. Now, you'll see a lot of broken pieces. Where did those come from? Well, I see broken pieces at the top of what they call cassette, which is basically your chain guide here. The tensioner is completely gone on this one, and we've also got some broken pieces on the top of the other cassette, and like I said, the other chain guide here was grenaded. This vehicle came in running in time. Now, I wouldn't have revved it up to 3,000 to 4,000 RPM. It likely would have jumped because chains want to slap and break things. But it's the fact that we have one, and it is repairable. This engine is low enough kilometers and clean enough it's worth it, rather than just simply slapping in another motor, which is fairly expensive to do. Remember, we can fix it. These parts are readily available still. Going OEM with these as well, in this case from Ford. Now you get lucky sometimes, and this customer did. This is actually one of the cassette guide bolts. You'll note the bolt is bent and the chain's been dragging. That's where our noise was coming from. So that chain was dragging a bolt. This bolt had snapped, would have been game over, and we would have been putting an engine or another major repair within this vehicle. So, neat other things to note. Really, really weird special service tools in this vehicle. We have a crankshaft holding, or camshaft holding tool that engages in the back of our cam, bolts to the top and get wedged to be held so that we can torque that torque heel bolt. Left-hand threads on certain bolts in this vehicle. On the back side of the other camshaft, we have another holding fixture to tighten up this and hold this camshaft so we can tighten the other chain. And then of course at the front of the vehicle, on the crankshaft, we have to hold the crankshaft in time before we time anything. which requires us to simply put the harmonic balancer back on, which has teeth that slides on there. And the way to time this, guys, is you keyway it, and literally that just holds on to the bottom of the block, and that's top dead center for cylinder number 1. Really neat stuff. I've got it reassembled. You see new parts, you see tensioners, you see everything nice and tight, because that's how we have to have this thing going back together. Back in the vehicle it goes, down the road with a happy customer. So we're hitting on a lot of timing stuff these days, guys, because that's what's coming into our shop. DG's ProTech is always extremely busy, but never too busy to have you come in and see us to make sure you're getting that awesome service that everybody else that comes to the doors gets. So make sure you're still following us along on our Facebook, our Instagram. Make sure you hit up our website, dgsprotech.com. Make sure you hit our open house coming up June 1st. We're going to have a dyno for the guys and a bit of a truck show. Loaded dyno on site by Advanced Revolution so we can play with some of the vehicles we've been building. We're going to have a complete open house so you guys can see our newly finished shop from a few months ago. Everything's going to be all cleaned up and shine out. There's going to be a barbecue. There's going to be a bouncy castle. We're going to have some of our vendors, including Motor Ops, Off the Lens Media, our sponsors with this. CKNX Radio is going to be here doing their on-site DJ all day. We're going to have lots of fun June 1st. Make sure you come and see us. We're hoping for nice weather. So for the rest of DG's ProTech and the rest of our team here for today, thanks for coming back and watching.